Today we're exploring one of the most compelling and controversial Loch Ness monster sightings on record, the Greta Finley encounter of August 20, 1952. This wasn't a distant glimpse across the loch's murky waters or a blurry photograph that could be anything. This was a close-up, terrifying encounter that lasted several minutes, witnessed by both a mother and her teenage son at just 20 yards a distance. But was it really the legendary monster, or something far more mundane? Today, we'll examine the evidence from both believers and skeptics in this fascinating case. On August 20, 1952, at precisely noon, Mrs. Greta Finley was enjoying a peaceful caravan holiday with her 13-year-old son, Harry, at Alderley, PA, about half a mile south of Alderley Castle on the eastern shore of Loch Ness. It was a beautiful Scottish summer day, and she was sitting outside their caravan when something extraordinary happened. In her own words recorded by researcher Tim Dinsdale, "I was sitting outside the caravan when I heard a continual splashing in the water. After several moments passed and realizing this was not the usual wash from a boat, I walked round. To my surprise, I saw what I believed to be the Loch Ness monster. But this wasn't a brief glimpse. Mrs. Finley and her son Harry stood transfixed, watching this creature for several minutes at a distance of just 20 yards from shore. The detail they observed was extraordinary. According to her account given to researcher Constance White just 2 days after the sighting, the total length visible would be about 15 feet. The neck was held erect, and where it met the water, it enlarged to join a bulky body. The head and neck together were 2 to 2.5 feet in length, the head alone being about 6 in long and of about the same width as the neck. But perhaps most intriguingly, what astonished me, apart from the hideous appearance of the head, was that there were 2 6-inch-long projections from it, each with a blob on the end. The skin looked black and shiny and reminded me of a snail more than anything. The psychological impact was profound. Mrs. Finley described being terrified and paralyzed with fear. Her son Harry was so affected by the encounter that, according to Tim Dinsdale, he gave up fishing entirely after this experience. Modern Loch Ness researcher Roland Watson has made the Greta Finley sighting a cornerstone of his argument for the monster's existence. Watson, who runs the comprehensive Loch Ness mystery blog, has conducted extensive analysis of this case, and his findings challenge the skeptical explanations. Watson's first major point concerns the location and water depth. Using the 1903 bathymetric survey of Loch Ness held at the National Library of Scotland, Watson demonstrates that at Alderley, PA, the water depth 20 yards out, exactly where the creature was observed, measures approximately 22 feet deep. This is crucial because it undermines the most common skeptical explanation. Watson also emphasizes the behavioral aspects that make this sighting unique. The creature didn't just disappear by swimming away, it submerged. As Watson notes, deer do not submerge and disappear under the surface. If this was a deer, then it would have remained in sight for a long time or clambered onto the shore. Either way, its identity would have quickly become apparent. The researcher has also examined the geographical layout using Google Earth, showing that there were no nearby outcrops or shore areas where a misidentified animal could have concealed itself. The witnesses had a clear, unobstructed view of the creature's behavior. Watson argues that the consistency between the accounts given to different researchers, first to Constance White in 1957, then to Tim Dinsdale around 1965, demonstrates the reliability of the witnesses. The core details never changed, even when recounted years later. Perhaps most importantly, Watson points to the profound psychological impact on both witnesses. This wasn't excitement or wonder, it was genuine terror that had lasting effects, particularly on young Harry Finley. Not everyone is convinced by the Finley sighting. Leading Loch Ness skeptic Ronald Binns, author of the Loch Ness Mystery Solved, represents the opposing viewpoint. Binns, along with fellow skeptics Maurice Burton and Stuart Campbell, unanimously agree on one explanation: Mrs. Finley and her son saw nothing more exotic than a red deer. The deer theory, as proposed by these researchers, suggests that what the Finleys observed was a young buck with short, stumpy antlers standing in shallow water near the pier. Maurice Burton was so confident in this explanation that he created his own drawing showing how a deer might appear from the witness's position. According to this theory, the projections with blobs on the end were simply the deer's antlers. The long neck was the animal's natural posture, and the dark leathery appearance was an optical illusion created by the water surface and lighting conditions. Burton specifically claimed that the water depth at Alderley Pier was shallow enough, around 3 to 4 feet, for a deer to stand comfortably. The skeptics argue that once the witnesses convinced themselves they were seeing something unusual, their fear response naturally followed, preventing them from making a more rational identification. Binns and his colleagues view this as a classic case of misidentification compounded by expectation and fear. They argue that the remote highland location, the cultural mythology surrounding Loch Ness, and the witness's state of mind all contributed to transforming an ordinary deer into something extraordinary. The skeptical position is that no matter how sincere the witnesses were, human perception is fallible, especially under stress. They contend that the Finley sighting, rather than being evidence for the monster, actually demonstrates how easily conventional animals can be misidentified under the right circumstances. When we examine both positions critically, significant problems emerge with the deer explanation. Roland Watson's bathymetric evidence is particularly damaging to the skeptical case. The 1903 survey clearly shows water depths of 22 feet at the exact location where the creature was observed, far too deep for any deer to stand. Moreover, Watson's comparison photos of swimming deer reveal a crucial discrepancy. Deer swimming in water hold their heads low and stretched forward, quite unlike the erect, majestic posture described by the Finleys. Swimming deer also maintain visibility of their ears, important sensory organs that would be constantly moving and clearly visible to observers just 20 yards away. The submersion behavior is perhaps the most compelling argument against the deer theory. No deer simply disappears underwater after standing stationary for several minutes. They either swim to shore, where their identity would become obvious, or they maintain their position. The idea of a deer having a heart attack and drowning, as some have suggested, strains credibility beyond reason. However, the believer's case isn't without problems either. The size discrepancies between Mrs. Finley's verbal description and her son's drawing are significant. If the total visible length was 15 feet, but the head and neck were only 2.5 feet, the proportions in Harry's sketch don't match. This raises questions about the accuracy of the observations or the reliability of memory over time. Additionally, while the psychological impact was real, fear and shock can also impair accurate observation. The witnesses may have seen something genuinely unusual without it necessarily being a surviving prehistoric creature. In 2020, Roland Watson managed to track down Harry Finley, now an elderly man living in Perth, Scotland. After decades of silence, Harry agreed to speak on camera about that fateful day in 1952. This interview provides us with the adult perspective of the boy who witnessed something that changed his life forever. So Harry, you had an interesting story to tell about the Loch Ness monster back in 1952. You and your mom, Greta Finley, were at the top end of Loch Ness at Alderley Pier. Just tell us what happened that day and what you saw. Well, I was just school age at the time, age 12, 13, and went there for a 4-night holiday caravan at Alderley Pier. And this particular morning I was out fishing, sitting at the end of the pier when I heard this unusual noise, not so much of a boat, but something similar, heard the wash on the shore, looked down and saw what appeared to be the monster. So at that time I dashed back to the caravan, alerted my mother and she came out, and by this time the monster had reached the pier and we stood on the shore at the side of the pier watching it as it was before it submerged. I had time to dash back to the caravan, get a box camera at the time, came back, I was trying to focus it. I'd always had it focused, ready for the shutter when my mother grabbed the camera out of my hand because she thought I was too frightened by it, and unfortunately the opportunity was lost. But we had an excellent view of the monster and I don't know what I could liken it to, but it was jet black, I would say, with 20 to 30 feet long. There were 2 humps visible above the water. Thought to see it could draw itself into more humps or whatever. But what took my attention was its long neck. It was about 3 feet in length, quite erect with a big head at the top of it, i.e., the size of a football. But what took my attention was the 2 little prongs sticking out top of its head with a wee ball at the top of them, not unlike a snail. Although I couldn't say it was any similar to that, but that's all I can describe it as. And then just as the monster went down, submerged again, it showed a big wake of wash up the shore because of the size it was and how deep the loch was. And that was the opportunity gone, but it was certainly an experience and one that I would like the chance to see that again, but my chance was gone. The Greta Finley sighting remains one of the most intriguing cases in Loch Ness monster research. While skeptics like Ronald Binns present plausible conventional explanations, Roland Watson's detailed analysis reveals significant flaws in the deer theory, particularly regarding water depth and animal behavior. What makes this case particularly compelling is not just the close proximity and duration of the sighting, but the lasting psychological impact on both witnesses. The terror experienced by Mrs. Finley and the life-changing effect on young Harry suggest they encountered something genuinely extraordinary, even if we can't definitively identify what that was. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is that the Greta Finley sighting represents the kind of encounter that keeps the Loch Ness mystery alive. It's detailed enough to seem credible, witnessed by multiple people, and resistant to easy explanation. Yet, it falls short of providing definitive proof of a monster. Whether you believe Mrs. Finley saw a surviving plesiosaur, an unknown species, or simply misidentified a conventional animal under extraordinary circumstances, her account remains a fascinating window into one of cryptozoology's most enduring mysteries. What do you think? Could the Finleys have been mistaken about what they saw? Or does their testimony point to something truly unknown lurking in Scotland's most famous loch? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the world's greatest mysteries.